Hello everyone. Today I'd like to tell you once again the story of Tusan, a single mother. She lives quietly through very ordinary days, where each morning begins with familiar small tasks and each evening closes with a kind of tiredness that goes unspoken. Tusan's life isn't marked by loud upheavals or dramatic moments that easily draw attention. It is woven instead from perseverance, from responsibility, and from a heart long accustomed to carrying more than it ever asks for. Tusan is the kind of woman who always puts her child first and herself last. She rarely complains and doesn't allow herself to be weak for long. Yet behind that silence lies a multitude of thoughts, countless choices she must make on her own, choices about how to live, how to love, and how to be a mother without losing herself along the way. And today, I want to continue telling that story. Not to paint Tusan as an extraordinary woman, but to share the story of a very real mother, one who is learning to allow herself peace, to trust, and to keep moving forward without having to hold herself so tightly anymore. That evening, Tusan did not go home right away. She sat for a long time in front of the vegetable stall she had already packed up, empty baskets neatly stacked by her feet, a few stray tying strings still resting on the wooden surface darkened by years of use. Her hand lay lightly on it, feeling each familiar scratch, quiet marks left by countless early mornings at the market, by endless moments of bending down and standing up, gathering bundle after bundle of vegetables to earn just enough for another day. The pale yellow streetlight spilled onto the narrow road, not fully bright, just enough to see the market slowly emptying. The sound of motorbikes grew sparse, a few hurried calls rang out and then fell silent, familiar figures disappearing one by one behind rows of closed stalls. Time seemed to slow. The scent of fresh greens, damp earth, and rinse water from the stalls lingered in the air, raw, ordinary, unmistakably real. Tusan sat still, in no hurry to stand, not watching anyone leave. In recent days, she had grown used to a mind that never stopped moving, one thought chasing another, questions piling upon questions. But now it was different. The thoughts were still there. They hadn't vanished, but they had settled, no longer pressing in on her, no longer stealing her breath. Inside her was a clear, quiet stillness, as if she had just crossed an invisible boundary she had never dared to step over before. She felt no confusion, no need to reassure herself. There was only one honest feeling. She had chosen not to make herself smaller anymore, not to bow her head just to keep the peace, not to step backward out of old habit. The thought wasn't loud, but it was steady enough to keep her sitting there a while longer, letting it sink deeply into her. That night, Tusan lay beside Lavi. The room was just dark enough, calm and hushed, with only a dim light from outside casting faint shapes on the wall. The child slept soundly, her breathing even, her chest rising and falling ever so gently. Her small hand still clutched the hem of her mother's shirt, as if letting go even a little would make her uneasy. Tusan turned slightly and watched her for a long time. She looked at the soft hair spread across the pillow, at the familiar face that had accompanied her through so many long, exhausting nights, at the tiny movements as the child shifted in her sleep. In that moment, she didn't think about tomorrow, didn't calculate what needed to be done, didn't ask herself how much stronger she still had to be. She simply lay there, letting their breathing slowly fall into the same rhythm, allowing her body to loosen after days of tension and worry. Tusan gently closed her eyes. Her weariness eased slowly but steadily, like the child sleeping beside her. For the first time in many days, sleep came without urgency, without restlessness. It arrived softly, deep and unbroken, untugged by unfinished thoughts, undisturbed by questions that no longer needed answers. The next morning, Hai arrived early. The sun had not fully risen yet, and the morning air carried a faint chill, just enough to make the quiet of the countryside tangible before the day truly began. In front of the gate, Hai had been standing there for some time, a light backpack slung neatly over his shoulder, the straps adjusted with care. He didn't look rushed, nor did he seem impatient. He simply stood there, upright and still, as if he had already prepared himself for this meeting, whatever the outcome might be. When Tusan stepped outside, He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze steady and grounded, neither searching nor evasive, then spoke in the familiar voice she knew so well, low, firm, each word clear. "I've taken a few days off. I want to take you and the child on a trip." The sentence was simple, without explanations or roundabout reasons. It was placed before Tusan like a carefully considered proposal, not impulsive, not a matter of chance. She paused for a brief moment. Not because Hai's intention surprised her, but because of the way he spoke, calm, direct, neither asking for permission nor applying pressure. She realized then that Hai wasn't standing there to persuade her, and certainly not to pull her away in haste. He was simply stating what he had chosen. As if sensing her silence, Hai continued, more slowly this time. Each sentence came with a pause, as though giving her time to hear, to think, and to feel. Not to run away, but to let you breathe, and to give the child a happy memory. His words didn't make Tusan feel weaker, nor did they make her feel overly sheltered. They simply opened up a space that felt just right, a place where she could pause, without bracing herself, without questioning whether she was neglecting something. The space in front of the gate fell quiet for a moment. Tusan didn't answer right away. She let Hai's words remain where they were, neither pushing them aside nor grasping at them. She understood clearly that this time, he wasn't making the offer to escape reality, but to give her and her child a genuine pause. Lavi stood nearby. When she caught the word trip, her eyes lit up instantly. Her face brightened in the most natural way, a smile breaking out without thought, as if that alone was enough to make the day feel different. Tusan looked at her daughter, at that simple joy, then turned back to Hai. His gaze was still there, unhurried, not pressing for an answer. In the end, Tusan nodded. Not out of softness. Not because she wanted to lean on someone to step away from what she was facing. That nod came from a quiet, unmistakable trust that this time, Hai wasn't pulling her away from life, but walking slowly with her toward a sense of peace, in a way that didn't make her shrink back, didn't strip her of her place in the choice itself. Hai was the one who prepared everything. He did each task quietly and unhurriedly, without rush and without needing reminders. Every item he picked up was examined with care and placed exactly where it belonged, as if it weren't just luggage for a short trip, but a sense of reassurance he was setting aside for the two of them. He packed Lavi's things even more carefully than his own, folding each small outfit neatly, smoothing every crease, checking whether there were enough warm clothes, whether he had missed the familiar set she liked to sleep in, whether he had forgotten any small item she usually clutched whenever she left home. Tiny, ordinary details that people often overlook when in a hurry, Hai remembered them all. It was as though he already carried a clear image of this trip in his mind, not to create something special, not to prove his thoughtfulness, but simply so that once they set off, Tusan and Lavi could feel at ease, with nothing more to worry about. In the car, Hai had Lavi sit between them. The child leaned close to him, her small body nestled neatly between two adults, close enough to feel safe. One of his arms held her, his hand resting gently yet firmly, not gripping, not loose, like a natural habit formed without his even realizing when. With his other hand, he drove, movements steady and decisive, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The car moved smoothly, neither fast nor rushed, each stretch of road passing in a calm, unhurried quiet. There was no sense of being urged forward, no pressure to arrive quickly. Everything unfolded at the right pace, exactly the way Hai was guiding this journey, step by step. From time to time, he glanced at Tusan. Not for long, just enough to be sure she was all right, then he spoke in a low, gentle voice, careful not to break the stillness inside the car. "Are you tired? Do you want to stop?" Short, simple questions, carrying neither excessive worry nor the expectation of a perfunctory reply, just care offered at the right moment, in the right way. Tusan didn't answer immediately. She gave a slight shake of her head, a very small gesture, then turned to look out the window. The scenery along the road drifted backward, rows of familiar trees, low rooftops, the village road stretching on, everything passing slowly, evenly. She watched without having to think, without reminding herself to stay strong or appear fine, as she so often did. For the first time in a long while, Tusan allowed herself to fully relax. Not because her worries had disappeared, not because life had suddenly become lighter, but because someone was quietly choosing to carry part of that weight for her. Hai did it naturally, without her needing to ask, without making her feel dependent or diminished. In that moment, Tusan simply sat there, letting herself rest behind his steadiness, watching Lavi doze in the middle, her breathing soft and even, and allowing her own breath to slow, falling into rhythm with the smooth turning of the wheels on the road ahead. The sea welcomed them with gentle sunlight and a cool breeze. Nothing harsh, nothing blinding, just a soft light spreading evenly across the pale blue water and the long stretch of sand ahead. The wind carried in a faint salty scent, just enough to remind them that they had left behind familiar roads and everyday worries. The waves rolled in steadily, not loud, each one following the next like a slow, measured breath. Tusan paused for a moment, letting the sensation touch her skin, before moving on. Lavi ran ahead. She kicked off her shoes, bare feet pressing into the sand as she ran and laughed, her laughter clear and unrestrained. The sand sank lightly beneath each step, leaving small prints that were quickly softened and erased by wind and waves. Lavi turned back, waving both hands, her voice bright with excitement. "Mom, Uncle, hi. Hurry." Hai quickened his pace by a few steps. He bent down and lifted the child high. Lavi burst into giggles, her laughter ringing even louder than the surf. She wrapped her arms around his neck with complete ease, no hesitation, no shyness, as if it were a familiar reflex. Hai held her securely, his movements smooth yet gentle, his eyes curving slightly with her smile. He didn't have to try to look happy, his joy was simply there, genuine and unforced. Tusan stood behind them. She didn't step forward right away, only watched the two figures ahead, a man and a child, their silhouettes distinct against the wide sea. Lavi's laughter carried on the wind, the gentle sun settling over everything. In that moment, something inside Tusan grew still. Not an emotion strong enough to bring tears, nor something too large to name, just a quiet, deep space opening within her. She realized then that Hai hadn't entered her life with promises spoken to reassure others. He had entered through steady presence, through quiet actions solid and dependable enough that a child could run toward him without hesitation, could wrap her arms around him without needing encouragement or reassurance. And as Tusan stood there, witnessing that natural trust, she understood that some things don't need to be said aloud, they only need to be felt, clearly and calmly, like the sea stretching out before them now. In the afternoon, Hai took the two of them to the seafood market. The market sat right by the sea, not large, but always lively, its rhythm seeming to quicken with each incoming wave. The salty scent of seawater blended with the smell of freshly caught fish hauled in from the nets, along with smoke from roadside grills, all mixing into an atmosphere that felt distinct and unmistakably real. Tusan walked slowly between the stalls, her familiar gaze sweeping over baskets of fish and trays of seafood, still glistening with water. She bent down to choose fish, checking gills and scales with movements ingrained from years of selling vegetables at the village market. Her voice remained calm as she asked for prices, no heavy bargaining, no rush, as if she were standing in a space that had always belonged to her. Hai walked a step behind. He carried the bags for her, taking each tied bundle of fish and squid, switching hands when they grew heavy, setting them more securely so no water would leak out. He didn't move ahead or urge her to choose faster. Every motion of his was quiet and natural, as though this were simply the role he occupied on this trip. Tusan didn't need to turn around, yet she could feel his steady presence right behind her. Lavi sat on his shoulders, her legs swinging lightly with each step. From up high, everything looked clearer, newer. Her curious eyes darted around the market, fingers pointing, questions tumbling out one after another. Why that fish was so big, why another shimmered with color, why people kept pouring water over the fish. Hai answered as they walked, sometimes with certainty, sometimes laughing and admitting he didn't know, then guessing together for fun. At times he explained so seriously that Lavi fell silent to listen, as if it were something important to remember. Tusan walked beside them, hearing her child's laughter, hearing Hai's low voice blend into the afternoon market, sensing how simple everything felt. There was nothing remarkable to recount, yet strangely, no one felt tired. There was no effort being made for this trip, none of the familiar tension of everyday life, just three people walking side by side, in rhythm. When evening came, they sat on the sand eating grilled corn. The heat of the day had softened, the last light faded, leaving the air cooler and calmer. A gentle sea breeze carried a faint chill, just enough to feel pleasant. Hot ears of corn were broken open, their aroma drifting through the air, thin smoke curling under the distant yellow lights of seaside stalls. Lavi sat in the middle, hands sticky with butter and salt, eating happily, laughing now and then because the corn was too hot. Tusan sat beside her, taking slow bites, tasting the familiar sweetness on her tongue, a feeling both ordinary and deeply peaceful. Hai sat across from them, occasionally brushing sand from the child's clothes, adjusting how she sat, small gestures repeated with ease, as though he had long been accustomed to this kind of care. Lavi looked up at Hai and asked in a straightforward voice, without hesitation or overthinking, "Will you take me out again in the future, Uncle Hai?" The question hung in the quiet of the evening beach, unmasked by waves or passing voices. Hai didn't answer immediately. He looked at the child, his gaze direct and warm, without avoidance. Then he spoke, clearly neither playful nor vaguely promising. "If you want, I'll take you to many places." Lavi smiled at that, bent down to keep eating, as if the answer was complete, requiring nothing more. Tusan sat beside them, having heard it all. Her heart warmed, a quiet yet unmistakable feeling. Not because of a grand promise, nor distant visions of the future, but because her child had been included in that choice, naturally, without explanation, without conditions, as if it had been right from the very beginning. On their last night by the sea, Lavi slept soundly. She lay tucked into the blanket, her small body naturally curled in on itself, breathing deep and even after a long day of tireless play. Her hair spread softly across the pillow, her face completely relaxed, no trace left of the daytime excitement or curiosity. The pale yellow glow of the night lamp fell over her small features, so gentle that Tusan stood there for a long while, unable to turn away. She remained still, listening to that familiar rhythm of breathing, as if trying to memorize this peaceful moment, a rare moment when her heart was not being pulled forward by worries. Only when she was certain the child was deeply asleep did she gently close the door, softly enough not to stir a sound. Outside, the sea breeze continued to blow steadily. Not strong, not sharp, just carrying a faint saltiness, enough to brush against the skin and remind one that the sea was still there, right beneath the balcony, quiet and enduring. Tusan and Hai sat outside on the balcony. Without saying a word, they sat side by side, close enough not to feel distant, yet not so close as to press against each other. The chairs faced the sea, where darkness stretched out, blending sky and water into one vast expanse. The waves lapped rhythmically below, sometimes near, sometimes far, without a fixed tempo, repeating like the slow breathing of the night. The wind moved through the balcony, gently stirring the small potted plants by the railing, leaves brushing softly against one another. The cool air made movement feel unnecessary. It invited stillness, a willingness to let everything simply pass. Tusan folded her arms across her chest, her gaze fixed on the darkness ahead. She wasn't searching for anything in particular, only looking at the place where sea and sky merged, where no clear boundary marked beginnings or endings. In that quiet space, she didn't feel the need to speak right away, nor did the silence feel heavy. After a long while, Tusan finally spoke. Her voice was soft, lowered, not trembling, yet not forcing strength the way she so often did. "I used to be afraid," she said slowly. "Afraid that if I loved again, I'd still have to carry everything on my own." The words fell so lightly they seemed ready to dissolve into the wind. They held no reproach, no complaint, only a simple truth. one she had kept inside long enough for it to become a familiar worry whenever she thought about taking another step forward. Hai didn't interrupt, nor did he turn to look at her right away. He let the words rest there, complete, the way one lets a wave finish breaking before speaking again. After a moment, he replied. His voice was low and even, neither raised nor softened beyond what was needed. I won't promise that everything will be easy, but if we go, I'll lead. I won't let you and the child walk alone. There were no vows, no long assurances meant to soothe. Just short, clear sentences, laid down as something he had already decided for himself. Tusan listened without reacting at once. She let the words settle, let them blend into the sound of waves below, into the cool breeze brushing her skin, into the quiet surrounding them. She leaned slightly, resting her head against Hai's shoulder. The movement was gentle, almost instinctive, no asking, no hesitation. His shoulder was steady, firm enough for her to lean on without feeling like a burden, warm enough to keep emptiness at bay. Hai didn't move. He simply sat there, letting her rest as though it were the most natural thing in the world. This time, the familiar questions no longer stirred inside Tusan. She didn't ask herself whether she should trust, didn't weigh hope against fear as she once had. She simply sat there, listening to the waves, feeling the presence beside her, quiet, unshowy, and allowed the moment to pass in calm acceptance, as if at last she had found a place where she could stop, without needing to stay on guard anymore. The next morning, they took a small photograph. It wasn't a carefully planned photo session, and no one arranged poses or gave instructions. It was simply a natural moment, when the seaside morning was still quiet, the sunlight had risen just enough not to glare, and a gentle breeze made the air feel fresh. Lavi stood in the middle, her small hands tightly holding her mother's hand and Hai's. She couldn't quite stand still, yet tried her best so the photo wouldn't blur, her face glowing with an innocent brightness. Sunlight fell softly on the three of them, not sharp enough to expose everything, just enough to make the moment feel warmer. Tusan stood there without thinking much. She didn't adjust her posture or force a perfect smile. She simply stood still, feeling her child's hand in hers, feeling the steady presence on her other side. The moment passed quickly, yet lingered long enough to stay with her, a small slice of the present, needing no name, no definition. No one called it a family. There were no introductions, no titles assigned to the bond between the three of them. But Tusan understood, clearly, quietly, in a way that needed no explanation to anyone else. Seedlingsome families don't begin with bloodlines or complete rituals, but with choice, the choice to stay, the choice to walk together, the choice not to turn away when things are still imperfect. Seedlingsome men don't only know how to say "I love you," but know how to lead through actions, through a presence steady enough for others to trust their steps beside him. Seedling and some journeys aren't meant to escape life, but to begin again, more slowly, more calmly, and with enough peace for one to believe they no longer have to hold themselves so tightly. Tusan looked at the photograph once more. She didn't feel the need to name anything. It was enough to know that, on that morning, amid gentle sunlight and a cool breeze, she and her child had stood inside a moment that felt real, where nothing needed to be perfect, yet everything was peaceful enough to begin.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Suốt một lần lỗi suốt hoài không phải trâu rồi. Bây giờ thì mình vẫn đang trong thời gian làm video mọi người ạ. Cảm ơn mọi người rất là nhiều vì đã luôn theo dõi và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhé.